Welcome to The Driven Entrepreneur, where we sit down with visionaries, trailblazers, and entrepreneurs and discover why and how they do what they do. We'll get the backstory, plus plenty of life and business lessons along the way. Here's your host, Matt Brauning.
Hey, this episode is brought to you by my very own NLP practitioner course. I've been teaching neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, for nearly 15 years. It is the most powerful tool for communication on the planet, and it can be yours today. For a very limited time, I'm giving away my entire NLP course workbook for free. Go to nlpwithmatt.com. All the patterns, all the tools, and the techniques of NLP in the complete course workbook, the same one that we use to teach our live certification classes, yours free. nlpwithmatt.com. Get it today. Let's get back to the show. Hey, welcome back to The Driven Entrepreneur. It's Matt Brauning, and we are with you another week, of course, with shockingly a driven entrepreneur, because we want to help you continue doing what you do best, which is start, run, and grow your business. With me today is a pretty darn interesting guest, Laura Michelle Powers. Now, before we bring Laura on, Laura is the host of the very popular Powers Hour podcast, and she is, among many things, a celebrity psychic, an entertainer, actress, model, host, singer, writer, and speaker. She's the host of another popular film and television podcast, Behind the Scenes with Laura Powers, one of the top 100 podcasts on Apple. She is an author of 8 different books, editing 2 more books. She's basically you and where you want to go. She's doing a little bit of everything and crushing it. I absolutely love this. Her latest book, Rock Your Podcast, How to Launch, Grow, and Monetize Your Show, was just released as a #1 bestseller. And of course, she's been all over media and television on places like BuzzFeed, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, CW, Jet Set, so many others. And she was just on, we're going to get to this, Will Ferrell's popular new podcast, the Ron Burgundy Podcast, as a celebrity psychic. Laura, are you with us? Laura Michelle Powers, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying, I swear, one day I'm just going to air everything that we pre-tape before we go to actually recording. Been really enjoying our conversation so far and looking forward to the next piece. When I run into someone like you, Laura, you know, you're the kind of the all things-preneur. My first question I want to ask is, did you grow up this way? Were you the little girl with a lemonade stand, or were you, and always coming up with an entrepreneurial endeavor? Or did you think you were going to go a different route, maybe corporate or something else, and then you fell into this? Tell me about your kind of growing up, the young wee Laura.
Yeah, so I don't think that I had the start of that so much. I mean, did little things like sell things for fundraisers and things like that. But I was very creative as a child, very creative and expressive, always doing the different arts things, singing, writing, acting. And I also, even at a young age, was interested in politics, which is kind of funny, not the typical thing. So leadership in that way. And I remember very distinctly when I learned that I couldn't be president based on the current laws because I was born out of the United States, that I was very upset. So I've always wanted to have leadership and be in leadership positions. But I also was very expressive. So I think I have these kind of 2 different sides of me that are always kind of, I wouldn't say fighting amongst myself, but it's definitely an aspect of these 2 different areas. And I think it's only recently that I've been able to merge them. And it was after I had just a complete kind of life turnaround. Like, I used to be really involved in politics. My master's degree is in poli-sci. I was working in government politics. And then that whole sector was really impacted during the recession. And I just did this total 180, started to get training as a psychic while I was making my living as an actress, which is kind of backwards. A lot of people are like trying to make a living as an actress. And then when I started working as a psychic, I just made a lot more money. So I switched my focus to the psychic thing because it was a better business for me at the time. And then as that has gotten more developed, I've really focused more on the business. And I think a lot of creative people, artists, writers, et cetera, they don't really realize that it's a business and their creativity is a business. So I think that's something that I grasped as I got into it, and then got really passionate about figuring out, how do I do this even better?
Yeah, I love that. I want to actually get into that in just a second about the creatives not realizing it's a business because I 100% do not agree with the phrase starving artist. I think
Oh,
there's artists and there's
yeah.
non-artists. And if you're an artist, you should be saying that you're a successful artist and go make that happen. If you're an entertainer, an entrepreneur, I love that instead of the classic LA, right? The actress, model, waitress, you are the actress, model, psychic, and it's a little bit
Yeah.
different path, and it seems to be a lot more powerful for you. Um, Before we move on to that, I want to ask you just about growing up because you did mention you're born outside the states. Did you come here as a baby? How old were you? And where were you? Where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born in France, and my mother is American, but she has French heritage, and she decided to just kind of explore. Met my father in a cafe in Paris.
Oh dear.
Decided to stay for a while. Had a couple of kids. They were traveling musicians basically for a living. So I grew up in this very artistic musical family. But it wasn't a healthy relationship. And my mother left my father when I was little. I was 5, and we came to the United States. And because I had been raised in France, and also because my father didn't speak English, I at that point was speaking French only. So I learned English in school in the United States. So I have this kind of unique experience of, like, my mom is American, so she's familiar obviously with here and had citizenship, but in a lot of ways I did feel like an immigrant as well because I came here, didn't speak English, was in English as a second language classes with others who were immigrants, almost all Spanish speakers, by the way. So lots of people from Mexico and a few from South America. And then, by the time I was 8, I was fluent in English. And so most people, they can't tell, they would have no idea that I, didn't speak English as my first language. But that really, I think, also did make an impact for me culturally. And I really value that experience. And I also have a lot of compassion for, like, starting afresh, because that was like a new beginning. We were very poor. We were on public housing assistance. I had free school lunches. And so on a family level, I know how we kind of started from scratch and we're able to build up. And then when everything fell apart for me during the recession, I went through a divorce. I could no longer find work for the first time in my life. And I started over in this completely new area. So I feel like no matter where you're starting from, you can be successful. And I really firmly believe in that. I want people to know that our success has nothing to do with anything but ourselves, our drive, our passions, and our abilities.
100%. And I think it's interesting that, you have that between 5 and 8 years old that a lot of people don't have a bunch of memories there, but it sounds like it's very, like you would have
Oh,
clear
yeah,
memories because of this strong emotional impact and a different experience. Um,
definitely.
if there was one, and I'm sure you've thought about this a bit, but what kind of, like, I don't know, beliefs or lessons did you pull out just kind of about life, about yourself, looking back, right? Maybe as the adult Laura Michelle Powers, looking back at that 5 to 8 year old, being different than everybody, but clearly figuring it out and growing. I think, like, for instance, those kids at that age, you could make a lot of beliefs, couldn't you? You could make a belief that I'm different, I don't fit in, and et cetera, et cetera. Or you could make positive beliefs. Is there anything that stuck out to you that kind of you naturally thought of that you began believing or filtering life through at that age?
I think I've always been pretty self-determined and had a lot of drive. So I think I learned pretty early on not to let other people's determination of me determine my path. Because, for example, I was still learning English in first grade, and I flunked technically. In fact, my teacher wanted to hold me back another year. And my mother thankfully said no. And I just kept plugging away. And I liked reading. I liked all these things. I was just still learning a whole new language, plus learning how to read at the same time. And so I flunked first grade, and then by the time I was in second grade, I was in advanced reading. And so I think it was just like, don't take whatever people believe about you in terms of limitations on, and just focus on whatever it is that you want in terms of your outcome, and you can. So I'm grateful for my mom. I think she showed me that. I think the things that I had to unlearn were very much about, specifically with finances. Like, I think there's a lot of poverty consciousness that we're taught as a whole, and certainly, like, I come from a family of teachers, and they're lovely people, but it's not generally speaking, most, like, for example, public school teachers don't make very good money.
No, it's not the
And
path to wealth, is it?
no, and so I think I really had to learn how to allow myself to receive more, and that it was okay, and not to judge myself for even wanting that, because I really felt growing up like it's, there's only so much we can have. And it was um this unspoken kind of rule in a way.
Dang. Wow. So coming from a family of teachers, just curious, what was your mom's kind of reaction or like support level with, and again, taking nothing away from your mother.
No,
What was she
exactly.
like when you were like, hey, I want to go be an actor. I want to, you're getting into the entertainment world and kind of moving in that direction when you moved away from poli-sci and everything. What was your mom's reaction? Is it like, you go girl, you can do anything? Or was it a little bit of that, hey, you have a sure thing, be careful? What was the attitude of the family, and not just your mother, but anyone else in the family?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two phases for me. There was before the recession and after the recession. So before the
Right.
recession, I did still somewhat follow my own path. So I majored in theater in college, and I remember when I told my mom my major, and she cried. I think that was her perspective on your ability to make money and kind of be stable and secure. She having been a poor artist as a musician, I think she just had decided that wasn't a good path. And so I did go and study that at university, but then I went and worked in the public sector. I started working at the University of Colorado in academia administration. And then I kind of checked all the boxes. That's when I got my degree in poli-sci, and I got married, and I was like, here's my house, advanced degree, all the things. And then everything during the recession just kind of fell apart. And it needed to, because I was off track in terms of my soul and just, also just life enjoyment. And then I kind of started over, and there was no work at that time, like very little work in my sector. And so I went and lived in China for a year, which was great. And that just was kind of a reset. And when I came back, I started my psychic business, and I just kind of manifested this acting job for a troupe that did these regular shows. And at that point, I was making money doing that. And I had also been doing a little bit of consulting still in government and politics. That wasn't making very much money, but it was just a little check. And then as my psychic business grew, it was like, ooh, this is more and more successful. And it was interesting to watch my mother and my family, because I know that at first a lot of people thought I was a little Looney Tunes. I'll be honest. I could tell they're being polite, but it was kind of like, oh, you poor thing, you're so misguided. And then as I built it and kept getting more and more successful, people eventually were like, oh, I think she knows what she's doing. So I think I had to convince people in a way that it was a viable path. And one of the best ways to do that was just to do it and show them through my actions and my success.
Well, it's interesting, right? It's such not a traditional place. I mean, I think it took a lot of years for my mom and dad to kind of, I don't know if they still know what I do for a living, but it's not the traditional path. When you started getting into this then, and you start seeing some success for it, what were some of the, I guess, the key indicators for you? Is it, hey, I'm getting a paycheck for this, people are paying me, or is it who you started working with? Media outlets coming, kind of what I guess what I'm really asking is, what was an indicator to you that, hey, this is viable after all, this really is working early on? And the reason I ask that is I think a lot of people in the entrepreneur space, they might not know what indicators to look for. So you might stay on a path too long that genuinely isn't viable, because just because you believe in yourself doesn't mean it's going to happen. You certainly need to if it's going to happen, right? But it doesn't mean it's going to. Anyway, long question to say, what were your indicators and how did you know that it was taken off?
Yeah, I would think it was a variety of factors. One was certainly I was getting that feedback from people that it was helpful. I'll never forget a situation with a woman who had been a friend of mine first, and I got intuitively to offer to do some free readings for some people that I felt intuitively to do so in the beginning. Because again, this was out of left field for most people. I was in government and politics. I worked at the president's office of a university. Like, to be a psychic was like, what? That there was really no segue for them and their minds for me in terms of like how this would work, or what my abilities were. And so I offered to do a reading for her. And she told me later that she basically did it just to be kind to me, because she felt bad for me and she thought I was delusional. But she did it. She came and I did a reading for her, and I
My
connected
favorite
with,
kind of clients.
yeah, exactly.
Hey, you're probably delusional, but I just want to support you. Go ahead, do your thing on me.
Exactly. And
What
but in
happened?
that, yeah, it was the best. But in the reading, I connected with the spirit of her mother, who, mother-in-law who passed, and also told her some things that there's no way that I could have known, through my physical senses. And she cried, and it was incredibly emotional for her. And she immediately became super passionate about what I did. And she told so many people about me and was like, referencing me all the time. And that's the kind of thing that, I knew I was on track, because this isn't the kind of thing you make up. Like, I went from someone being a complete skeptic and feeling sorry for me because they thought I was delusional, to being one of my biggest supporters out there and telling everyone about me. So things like that, if you have that kind of experience with people are really impressed and impacted by whatever it is that you're doing. And then I also very rapidly had media success. So that was one of the things I was guided to do. So I was guided to give readings at a local coffee shop. I'll be honest, I didn't want to do it, but I put up a flyer in the window the first day of those readings. The managing editor of the local newspaper called and asked if he could write a story about me. And then I was in the regional newspaper 2 days later. So, and then my phone started to ring. So, these kinds of things, like, I think we get kind of signs and messages when we're on track and off track. And for me, I had this kind of rapid success, very deep impact very quickly. And that was completely the opposite experience of where I had been working in politics at the end there. And like, applying for a job for 6 months, no job, ran out of unemployment, felt like I was running my head against a wall with frustration of like nothing working. And you talked a little before we started recording about hustling. Like, I'm familiar with hustling, but I think the best thing is when you're aligned, and then the little things you do have a great impact versus having to push so hard. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are too much in that like struggle push mindset, instead of just being in alignment and following your intuition, and things can kind of line up for you very quickly and easily.
Let's talk about alignment a little bit. I think that's something that I think is talked about a lot, but maybe more talked about than understood. What is your take and your perspective on really knowing if something's alignment? I mean, there's the gut level check and so forth, but I don't know. I think I've been talking to a lot of people lately that they're in kind of a quandary of like, hey, I have an opportunity in front of me, or I have this thing that I'm passionate about, but maybe I'm not good at it, or something I'm good at, but I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do. And these, especially early on entrepreneurs, it's really easy to be at that metaphorical or literal fork in the road. What advice do you have for someone kind of looking at and deciding, is this in alignment? Is this the right thing to go down? Do we explore it and see what happens? Do we say, yes, I'm certain, and then cut off the other options? What's your personal take on that alignment perspective? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think this is a really complex topic, certainly. So
It is.
I,
And this isn't a single
Mhm.
answer, by the way. This can hopefully
Yeah,
be a launching pad for our conversation.
but I think on a deep level, it's like something, does it feel exciting, appealing? And I want to give the caveat that sometimes the journey to it may not sound exciting and appealing, but when you think about the outcome, does it sound exciting and appealing? So, for example, the idea for me of working publicly and helping to teach and share, like, I come from family of teachers, that came very naturally. Um, Being featured in one way or the other as an actor, all these things were exciting. The part that was hard is that kind of resistance, and it's more working through the energy that I think is the tough part sometimes versus the actual physical work. So the more alignment I've gotten, the easier my actual work is. But the hard part has been working through maybe the programming, for example, about what it's okay for us to do and not do. So I don't think it's a simple answer, but I do encourage everyone to really tap into their body. And I feel our body is the biggest communicator for us, especially who don't have practice with learning about alignment and not alignment, because our bodies are constantly communicating with us. So like paying attention to your gut. And, when you think about making forward on a particular action or opportunity, like really sitting with your body, do you feel heaviness in the pit of your stomach? Do you feel kind of a fluttering in your heart? Like, these are all things that can really help provide information for you, because a lot of times analytically we might think something sounds like a good idea, but then when we sit with it, our body, and it's like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. So paying attention to that feeling will really help you with questioning and figuring out that alignment piece.
That's really, really good. When you talked about like, the pit of your stomach or the fluttering, what do you think about the distinction too between, so sometimes let's say for me, like anxiousness and excitement, I think for most people is a very similar physiological feeling, right? So like I remember like the boss, right? Bruce Springsteen uh famously said that, they asked him in an interview, do you get nervous before you go out on stage? And he's like, all the time for 40 years. And that's how I know I still love it. So having a feeling, like, it's not objective, right? It's like if you get those butterflies, it might mean something. What about the kind of the distinction between, hey, do I feel nervous? And that means maybe this is just, I'm nervous, it's out of my comfort zone and I should go for it, versus this is an indicator to maybe look deeper. And I know, again, it's a subjective experience, but again, even like reading what your body is saying to you, how do you help someone, or what would you say to someone that's trying to understand a little deeper? What does that mean when my
Yeah,
body does something or says something?
I think it's a really great topic. By the way, I highly recommend the book, What Every Body Is Saying, like every space body. It's written by a consultant who works a lot with law enforcement, FBI, and police in criminal cases when they're trying to figure out like who committed a crime or whatever. And he analyzes body language and facial expression and whatnot. But it was fascinating to read that book because I realized that there were things I could decode in myself that I didn't even consciously realize what was going on. So I recommend checking that out. It's a really fascinating read. But yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the idea of fear, because fear is something that I think we're kind of taught to stay away from. And fear, when it's a fear of like literally like a dangerous physical thing, I think frequently that's something to pay attention to. But psychological fear for us frequently is about something that's getting out of our comfort zone. And the only way frequently to get what we want and to grow is to get out of our comfort zone, which may feel scary. So I think if you're really moving forward on your path in a good way, then you can't do that without moving through fear. And in fact, frequently something is aligned when I feel that kind of fluttery feeling and the fear. And I try
That's
to focus
good, yeah.
on the fluttery feeling, the excitement versus the fear. But to contrast that with like when something just feels heavy, like in the gut, I just feel like, ooh, that just feels heavy. And that to me is not something good. And that's not about working through something. That's something that just literally feels heavy energetically. So a lot of what people do is, unfortunately, they feel that fear and they just retract from it. And I feel like almost everything that is helpful for us and good for the world and for growth is moving through at least some of that fear.
Speaking of moving through fear and good fear, we were talking just before we went about you getting on to Will Ferrell's podcast. And fear might be a strong word, but I'm assuming, as we were talking, kind of sharing both of our experiences, showing up to a gazillion interviews like we're doing right now, we've done that a lot. But to show up to, Will Ferrell, he's an A-list celebrity star. You're in a podcast studio with the whole production team. Tell me, I don't know, I guess first off, what was that like? What's it like coming in there? How did you feel? Did they reach out to you? Were you pushing forward and manifesting it for years? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. So first of all, I am constantly doing manifesting exercises to call in various things. And I hadn't like specifically mentioned him, but I had asked for like, very kind of A-list positive media opportunities. And then, yeah, that just kind of popped in my lap. Like I didn't pitch them. They reached out to me, invited me to be a guest. And if you get these opportunities, please just say yes. Like they called me and it was, I think 5 or 6 p.m. And they said, can you be in the studio tomorrow at 11? Well, I was not in Los Angeles, but I didn't tell them that. I said, yes, no problem. And
I love that.
I immediately booked a flight and just flew out there that night and then was there in the studio in the morning. And sometimes there's things we've been working on in other areas and then we're presented an opportunity. So that was an unscripted interview. I had no idea what he was going to say. He's in character throughout the whole thing. He didn't break character through the whole thing. There was no discussion. It was just like, and go. And like, he's asking me questions. And I had to, it was like this weird thing because I'm having to act to a degree because he's not a real person. Like Ron Burgundy is a character. So I'm having to act like he's really asking me those questions when actually, it's Will Ferrell pretending he's acting,
Right. He's in the Anchorman character, which I think
exactly.
is so fun. What a great idea for a podcast.
Totally fun. And so this is the kind of thing where I think my previous experience was so helpful because for years I did improv. And so I had experience of just like going off the cuff and just going with it. And one of the biggest fears that a lot of people have is that public speaking. And if people are afraid of public speaking, just imagine going on stage and like you have to perform and you don't even know what you're doing. Like that's what takes a lot to move through that. So I'm very grateful for that experience. And I started doing improv when I was 14. I was actually in a paid improv troupe in high school, which is very unusual. And then I did it in college as well. And then I also did when I was doing my acting work, we would do these what's called signposting, where it's like a loose script based on here's what happens, but there's interaction with the audience. So the actual script, you don't know what the people are going to say. It's changing all the time. So I encourage people to do that, to practice just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, so to speak, and then just focus on whatever you're doing instead of like getting in your head about it. And with practice, really serves you. But yeah, it was an amazing opportunity. It's so fun. And, I also encourage everyone to connect with and do media, because no matter what your industry, it can be helpful for your business.
Yeah, that's it's so much fun. And what I want to harken back to a second is you said you really needed your improv skill set, and you've been cultivating that since you were 14 years old. What do you believe about preparation versus opportunity, without using the age old whatever the axiom is, preparation and opportunity meet luck or whatever it is? But I think there's something too. It's like being prepared when, God comes calling, being prepared when the opportunities show up, that you actually have been preparing for this, even if you didn't know it was coming. Because I don't know that you were like, you know what, at 14, I'm going to do improv because one day I'm going to be on a podcast with Will Ferrell and I'm going to need that skill set. And again, this is kind of off the cuff as well, right? But what do you believe about preparation? How can we prepare ourselves more for future opportunities that we might not even know are in the realm yet?
I really believe in getting in the room, taking classes and practicing whatever it is that you want to do. You know, I'm constantly taking classes. I spent like 30K in professional development just last year. I'm constantly doing that, encourage other people to do that, and just take the next step. And what I see with a lot of people is they want that final outcome. But the truth is, if they got that outcome like today, would they be prepared? Probably not. So it does take sometimes this incremental learning and these different steps. So not only had I done improv, but I also have been a podcaster for years. So I was familiar with podcasting medium. I've done hundreds of interviews where I was interviewed. I've done hundreds of interviews where I was interviewing other people. So all of those things help prepare me. So whatever it is that you're aiming for, start to take class, connect with other people that do that, model and emulate them, and take those, little steps every day, so that when that big opportunity does present itself, you don't fall flat on your face, because you've maybe not done that exact thing before, but like you've at least done enough similar things that you feel more confident.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Laura. I know also, like, you've done quite a bit of different television on different networks, and I love like doing, I've been all over the country doing local TV, same as you, and all the different shows and stations and everything. And what's interesting is when you have this, a new, say, an entrepreneur or a speaker that's like, or a new author, right? And you say, what's your goal? I want to be on Oprah, back when there was an Oprah, or I want to be on the Ellen Show, or and it's like, I want to be on the Today Show. And you're like, right, I love that. But if you went on today, that might be the worst thing that could ever happen to you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, here you are, unprepared, brand new, and then with the huge national audience, and it just, it doesn't go well. So there's something to that, not just the preparation, but almost the sacrifice of, I'm willing to go to the small place. I'm willing to get 50, 100, TV interviews or podcast interviews under my belt. Kevin Hart famously said he toured the country four times before he finally broke through as a mainstream comedian and actor. Four times. He had every comedy club in America. Like, I don't know how many people will give up after one. What do you have any stories about kind of, I don't know, banging your head against the wall or going after something and maybe the failure seeming like it's not working, but you kept at it anyway? Or have you had the other experience where maybe you're like, you know what? I want this. I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to manifest it. And then the doors are opening. What is your personal perspective of following the dedication, the following through? Do you hit at it until, or do you always look for kind of that, not path of least resistance? What am I looking for? Do you look for that open path? Hey, the doorways are opening, or do you just go at it until you get it?
Gosh, I feel like there's energetic aspects to this and setting intentions, and then there's the action. And I really feel they're both important. And if you are not doing either of those pieces, that it's just harder for that to come in. I think most people give up when they're so so close. They just get tired. They think, what's the point? In fact, I literally got the statistics psychically. This is a psychic statistic, so you can take it for what it is, but that 98% of people quit right when they're on the verge of a major breakthrough. And that's frequently when we get the biggest urge to quit. And take the steps, do the daily things, take the classes, get in the room. And then how much of a shame would it be if what if, I'm sorry that I can't get the name of that comedian. What if he quit like 3.5 times through his tour and he's like, forget it, this isn't working out. But that's what most people do. They stop before they have that success. And that's not to say that you should keep doing something if it's unaligned. And that's I think what's sometimes tricky for people. In my case, I've just seen it over and over again, the success that comes when you're just on the verge and you're so frustrated and it comes in, and it's like planting these seeds. And when we take these action steps, I think it's like us telling the universe we're committed to, like we're asking the universe for something, we're setting that intention, we're asking for it, but we also need to make that commitment and do what we can to help it bring it in. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are the things that came to mind.
Oh, it does. And I love these questions, hopefully are much more like a fun conversation. Because, when you said the action tells the universe that you're serious about it, right? That you actually want to do that. I think, I love the metaphor of a GPS system. When you plug it in, it's always frustrating when I'm sitting in the bank parking lot and I plug in my next location because it doesn't do anything until I begin moving, right? But if I begin moving, it tells the guidance system, hey, he's serious, he's moving. And then all of a sudden the map flips around and tells me which direction to go. And I start taking the steps. So I love that you're all about alignment, but also about action. Laura, you have a pretty cool Instagram. I was looking through some of your posts and all your lessons and things you put on. You guys got to check it out. It's Laura Powers 44, the number 4, Laura Powers 44. And then her Facebook is Laura Michelle Powers. Great place to follow and connect with Laura. And then you have a phenomenal podcast. I want to, as we kind of wind down here, Laura Michelle Powers, tell me about the Powers Hour podcast a bit. That's something exciting. And that's I think your newest podcast, right? Because you have a couple.
It's not my newest, but it's one of my newer. I host a lot of podcasts, but yeah, it's one of the things I use podcasting for is to like learn and network and connect in different areas. So as I got more into entrepreneurship and business, which again, my creative work as well as my psychic work is definitely business, I wanted to learn more, connect, share what I learned. And so I started that podcast. So I talk with a lot of podcasters. I talk with, business owners, and we talk about marketing. We talk about, mindset. We talk about strategies and tools, and then also just lifestyle, because I feel like ultimately, the desire for these things is to create a life that we love. Like I'm not about creating a business so that I can just work all the time and grind myself down. Like I want to have a nice lifestyle.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that is definitely a great listen. So go check out Power Hour Podcast with Laura Michelle Powers. Laura, any final thoughts that if you had a bumper sticker to leave with the audience of what it would be amazing to believe or think or do, what would you say?
You are so much more powerful than you think you are.
Amen. Laura, what's the best place to connect with you? I know we shouted out the Instagram, Twitter, but feel free, please. You've been given so much value. I love to plug your stuff so we can stay connected with you and continue getting a good, valuable conversation with you.
Sure. So my website, powershour.biz, is where I share a lot of the stuff on mindset, podcasting, and I teach podcasting and book writing courses, and love to hear from people. Email is bookings@laurapowers.net.
Awesome. You heard it here first, folks. Well, maybe not first, but Laura, bookings@laurapowers.net for media, and get Laura on your show. I know you are doing guesting, so get her on the show, do some fun stuff, and keep on cranking. Thanks so much, Laura. I appreciate the time and getting to know you a little better. Glad that through our mutual friend, Adam, we were introduced. Looking forward. And hey, Adam, I know you're probably healthy and feeling great by now, but shout out to Adam. You are one of the good ones. Thank you, my friend. Laura, thank you so much for coming on, and I will talk to you soon, I hope.
Yes. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, guys, that's the show this week. Laura Michelle Powers, thank you so much to my guest this week. Remember, you can follow Laura on her Instagram at Laura Powers 44 and Facebook at Laura Michelle Powers. Check out the Powers Hour podcast. And then if you want to find out more about what she's up to and what she's doing as well, it's healingpowers.net is the website. We'll have that all in the show notes. If you're getting this live, of course, you can go on demand wherever you get podcasts. You know that by now. But I got to tell you one more time, make sure you subscribe so you can get these on demand. There's 250 plus back episodes of The Driven Entrepreneur. They're always available. There's no paywall. I love you and I want you to have these things. Follow me at Matt Brauning, Brauning, on any social media, especially Instagram. And I will catch you soon. Get out there and stay driven this weekend. And I'll see you next week with another Driven Entrepreneur. Bye-bye. Bye. Cheers.